Beneath his boots, the wood creaks as Thomas Hathaway shifts uncomfortably in the rocking chair. Only by the dim glow of a single oil lamp is his weathered face illuminated. It is the year 1853, and against the cabin walls, the howling Tennessee wind batters like some vengeful spirit seeking entry. From his pipe, Thomas takes a long draw, the ember briefly illuminating his sunken eyes that for months have not known restful sleep. His once robust frame has diminished, his clothes hanging loosely on his body as if they belonged to a larger man. Once warm and inviting, the cabin now feels like a tomb. In its drafty corners, shadows seem to move when not directly observed. Now, I feel compelled to speak of it, his voice barely rising above a whisper. He begins, the words scraping past his throat like gravel. Perhaps in telling the tale, I might free myself from its grasp, though I doubt such mercy awaits a man like me. Save for the intermittent pop and hiss of the fireplace, the cabin settles into silence, into the darkness. An owl calls, its mournful cry hanging in the air like a portent. Against the window, a branch scrapes, leaving marks that resemble the desperate scratches of human fingers. It began in the spring of '52. Thomas continues, setting his pipe aside on a small table and smooth from years of use, when along the Cumberland River, Margaret and I purchased the old Wilcox property, 20 acres of fertile land, a sturdy cabin built by the previous owner's own hands, and distance enough from town to afford us the privacy we so desired. Pausing, Thomas runs a calloused hand through his greying hair. Once a rich chestnut brown, it was now streaked with silver-like veins of ore in dark stone. Back then, Clarksville was growing, but still small, enough that folks knew each other's business. Margaret and I wanted somewhere we could build our family away from prying eyes and wagging tongues. From my years as a carpenter, I'd saved enough to buy land outright, and the Wilcox property seemed Providence itself. In his chair, Thomas shifts, wincing as if the memory itself causes physical pain. About the property, the townsfolk in Clarksville whispered, of course. They said the Wilcox family had abandoned it in haste after a series of misfortunes. When I entered, the men at the general store would fall silent, exchanging glances heavy with unspoken warnings. After church service, Mrs. Wilson, the pastor's wife, actually grasped Margaret's hand, tears in her eyes as she urged us to reconsider, but landed fine at that price. A man would be a fool to heed idle gossip. A bitter smile crosses his face, twisting his features in the lamplight. And I, as events would prove, was indeed that full double quote in the oil lamp. The flame flickers, casting dancing shadows across the cabin walls. For a moment, those shadows seemed to take form, to twist into shapes that no Christian man should contemplate. Faces contorted in silent screams, hands reaching from darkness. We arrived in early April. In bloom, the dogwoods were coating the hills in white, like a late dusting of snow. The property had been vacant almost a year, but the cabin was sound. The oak beams were thick as a man's thigh, the stone foundation dug deep. A meticulous craftsman, the previous owner, Samuel Wilcox, had fitted every joint perfectly, every nail driven true. Thomas's eyes grow distant, remembering. When we arrived, Margaret was with child, 7 months along and glowing with the promise of motherhood. After 3 years of marriage with no blessing of offspring, we had begun to fear the Lord had not seen fit to grace us with children. The midwife in Nashville suggested Margaret's frame was too narrow, that childbearing might prove dangerous. Then there was the matter of my own family's history. Only me did my mother bear before her womb withered, and my father's sisters were similarly afflicted with barrenness. But then, as if by miracle, Margaret's belly began to swell with life. Rising from his chair, Thomas moves to the window, peering out into the oppressive darkness. His face is reflected back at him by the glass, laid over the black nothingness outside, creating the unsettling impression of a ghost trapped between worlds. Those first weeks at the property were filled with hope. While Margaret prepared the cabin for the child's arrival, I set about planting corn and beans. From cherrywood, I built a cradle, lined it with padding sewn from the softest cotton. Blankets and tiny garments were knitted by Margaret, humming hymns as her needle flashed in the firelight. Of names we spoke, of hopes for our child's future. Would he be a farmer like his father? A scholar, perhaps? Of a son who would attend university, perhaps become a doctor or lawyer. Margaret dreamed. His knuckles whiten as he grips the windowsill, wood creaking beneath his desperate strength. On a clear June morning, William was born, hearty and hale, with a cry so strong it startled the midwife. Mrs. Abernathy, God rest her soul, said she'd never heard a newborn with such powerful lungs. All the way from Clarksville, she'd come to attend the birth, staying 3 days to ensure Margaret's recovery. Even she seemed to relax in those first days, her earlier reservations about our choice of property fading as William thrived under his mother's care. As if steeling himself for what must come next in his narrative. Thomas draws a deep breath. The first few months were unremarkable. William thrived. Margaret recovered her strength. I tended the fields and repaired the cabin where need. In that golden haze that surrounds new parents, the summer passed, exhausted yet exultant. By harvest time, William had grown into a sturdy infant, quick to smile, strong of grip. When I would return from the fields, his eyes would track me across the room, more aware than seemed natural for a child his age. Margaret said it was a sign of intelligence, that our son would indeed be the scholar she hoped for. To his chair. Thomas returns, the floorboards protesting beneath his weight with long drawn-out groans. It was near William's first birthday when we first noticed something peculiar. Not yet had the boy spoken, not even simple utterances like "Mama" or "Papa." Margaret began to fret, comparing our son to the Simmons boy in town, who was already stringing together simple phrases by his first year. Mrs. Abernathy assured us this was not uncommon, that some children simply take longer to find their voice. My own father claimed I didn't speak until well past my second birthday, then startled the household by reciting a full verse from Psalms. For his pipe he reaches again, but stops, his hand trembling mid-air before retreating to his lap. Then came the incident with the sparrow, a small thing, hardly worth mentioning, yet it haunts me still. In the yard, William was playing while Margaret hung laundry. The day was bright, late May sunshine warming the earth after a week of spring rains. Not 20 yards away, I was repairing a fence post when I heard a commotion. A sparrow had fallen from its nest, injured or perhaps newly hatched and unable to fly. William had found it, was crouched over it, his small hands cupped around the creature. Hard Thomas swallows. The sound audible in the quiet room. Down his temple, a bead of sweat traces a slow path despite the cool night air. Margaret called to him, warned him to be gentle. Birds are delicate things, she told him. We must treat God's creatures with care. And that's when it happened. William looked up. His eyes, God help me, his eyes seemed different somehow. Darker, empty, yet somehow filled with something ancient. And he spoke his first word. Just one word spoken with perfect clarity. Not the babble of a child, but the precise diction of a grown man. Rake. Suddenly, the lamp flame jumped as if disturbed by an unseen draught, elongating and twisting into an unnatural shape before settling back into its steady burn. In his hands, the sparrow convulsed violently, its tiny body contorting in ways that defied nature. The snap of fragile bones I heard, saw blood seep between my son's fingers. Then it went still. Dead? Margaret was delighted her son had finally spoken, rushing to embrace him, praising his achievement while gently taking the bird's corpse to discard it. But I saw what happened to that bird. No child's grip could cause such a thing. No natural death could explain what I witnessed. For a long moment, Thomas falls silent, lost in the corridors of memory. When he speaks again, his voice has dropped even lower, as if afraid the very walls might be listening. Never again did William speak. For weeks afterward, Margaret tried to coax another word from him. She would point to objects, to ourselves, repeating their names slowly as if teaching a foreign tongue. Say Mama, William, Ma. But William remained silent, watching us with those eyes that seemed to hold knowledge no child should possess. At night, I would wake to find him standing in his crib, staring at our bed, unblinking for hours. Margaret said it was normal, that babies sometimes wake and self-soothe, but there was nothing normal in that gaze, nothing childlike in that silent vigilance. He leans forward, elbows on knees, a posture of defeat. With the movement, the chair rocks slightly, its rhythmic creak like the rasping breath of some dying thing. 3 days after speaking that single word, William developed a fever. Nothing unusual for a child his age, or so Mrs. Abernathy told us when Margaret sent for her in a panic. But this was no ordinary fever. Hot as a blacksmith's forge, his small body burned, yet he shivered as though submerged in ice water. His skin took on a blue-grey cast, his lips parched despite our constant efforts to make him drink. But worst of all were his eyes. They remained open, unblinking, fixed on some point beyond the cabin walls that only he could see. Thomas's voice cracks, a harsh sound like splitting wood. Without ceasing, Margaret prayed for the doctor. I rode to Clarksville, but he was attending a birth 20 miles in the opposite direction. Every folk remedy known to Tennessee mothers was tried by Mrs. Abernathy. Poultices of mustard seed, teas of willow bark, cool cloths soaked in vinegar, water. Nothing helped. Through that long night, the fever raged as we kept vigil, helplessly watching our son burn from within. His face he covers with his hands, shoulders shaking with suppressed emotion. By morning, he was gone. No warning, no chance for final words or tender mercies. Simply gone. His small body crawling in his mother's arms as dawn broke over the Cumberland. Margaret would not release him. Not until Mrs. Abernathy gently pried her fingers from his nightshirt, leading her away so I could prepare my son for burial.